The leader of majority, don't you have a normal statement of Thursday on the business of the following week?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I was standing up, then the clerk moved away. Honorable Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 44-2A, I rise to give the following statement on behalf of the House Business Committee, which met on Tuesday, 8th November 2022, to prioritize the business for consideration during the week. Honorable Speaker, on Tuesday, the House expects to undertake the first reading of the following bills: the Political Parties Amendment Bill of 2022, the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Amendment Bill 2022, and 3, the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill 2022. The House will also consider motions on approval of nominees to various National Government Constituency Development Fund committees and tree planting along roadsides and road reserves, should it not be concluded today. Honorable Speaker, next week, the departmental committees will be conducting the vetting of various principal secretaries, secretary nominees. Additionally, the House is also expected to undertake the election of members to the East African Legislative Assembly, EALA. I therefore want to urge members to be diligent and avail themselves to ensure that there is sufficient quorum both in the committees and in the House to conclude all urgent business within the set timelines. And that is most, or especially with the vetting of principal secretaries and the election of EALA members. Honorable Speaker, members will recall that this week the House has been considering the legislative proposal on the National Government Constituency Development Fund, the appointment of members to the Parliamentary Service Commission, as well as approving some changes to committee membership that were occasioned by the outcome of elections of chairpersons and their vice chairpersons, amongst other matters. In this regard, I would like to extend my gratitude to all members for their dedication and active participation in this process to elect the leadership within their committees, and plead with the members of the House to work with the elected leadership. Honorable Speaker, now that the committees are fully constituted and in place, I encourage them to robustly undertake their oversight, legislative and representative roles in earnest and serve the people of Kenya, whom we represent here. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, the House Business Committee will reconvene on Tuesday, 15 November 2022 to schedule business for the coming week. I now wish to lay this statement on the table of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Honorable members, before we go to the next order, allow me to acknowledge the following schools in the public gallery. Students from Alliance High School, Kikuyu, Kiambu. Students from Riverbank Academy, Starehe, Nairobi. Students from Tharaka Boys, from Tharaka, Nithi. And students from Kiboko Primary School in Kibwezi, Makueni. On your behalf and my behalf, I extend a most hearty welcome to them to the House of Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 83, as read together with Standing Order number 1, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, while considering a number of regulations that were referred to the Committee on Delegated Legislation in the last 2 meetings, Mr. Speaker, we were faced with a lacuna in which there are certain, what was brought before the committee, Mr. Speaker, is that there are certain regulations that have been made by certain statutory bodies or persons that are authorized to make regulations, but they have not brought them to the House, Mr. Speaker. We looked at the Statutory Instruments Act, and we found that the committee can only consider only regulations that have been tabled before this House and referred to the committee, Mr. Speaker. Now, we made an attempt of trying to find out what do we do with these regulations, Mr. Speaker. And we came to the conclusion that we need to come to this House and appeal to you, Mr. Speaker, to make a ruling with regard to those regulations that have been promulgated by statutory bodies who have authority to make those regulations but have not brought them to this House, Mr. Speaker. And while researching on what needs to be done, Mr. Speaker, we came across the ruling of your predecessor, which is dated the 26th of March 2014, Speaker Muturi, while giving guidance with regard to statutory instruments that are tabled in this House and referred to the Committee on Regulation, on Delegated Regulation. Mr. Speaker, and I would just like to read, and this is what he said. Under Section 11 of the Act, every Cabinet Secretary responsible for a regulation-making authority shall within 7 sitting days after the publication of statutory instrument ensure that a copy of the statutory instrument is transmitted to the clerk for tabling before the House together with an explanatory memorandum in the manner prescribed in the schedule. Upon receipt of the statutory instrument and the memorandum, the clerk enters this instrument into the register required to be maintained under the Act. Mr. Speaker, your predecessor took parliamentary notice that there are certain cabinet secretaries or statutory bodies that don't make regulations, they don't bring them, and they require people to comply. And this is what he said, Mr. Speaker.